This is the Martial Arts Lifestyle Podcast, where we have conversations with everyday martial artists about their histories and how martial arts influence their daily lives. You are listening to the abbreviated version of this podcast, which is the first 20 minutes or so of the show. Please consider supporting the show by subscribing on our Patreon page, www.patreon.com/MALMAG, and for about the price of one coffee shop coffee per month, you can get access to 4 new podcasts each month, 1 week before their YouTube release dates. You also have access to all of our existing shows, which at this point is about 100 hours of shows for you to enjoy. Individual shows can be purchased at our Gumroad page. That is malmag.gumroad.com. This week I talk with Sean Sutton, who's in Cincinnati, Ohio. We talk about how he got started in martial arts, how the martial arts related to his time in the Marine Corps, and how a happy coincidental stationing in Hawaii got him hooked up with Burton Richardson. Sit back and enjoy. Welcome to the Martial Arts Lifestyle Podcast, and this week I'm connecting to Cincinnati, Ohio, a place I actually spent a little time when I was like 12 years old. We'll get into that with the guest a little bit and see if he kind of has a giggle at some of the things I remember from there. This gentleman's kind of part of our larger martial art family. He's got some very interesting and varied background and interesting connections to the whole thing, and I'm actually looking very forward to getting a chance to chat with him and learn a little bit more about him. So welcome, Sean Sutton, to the show.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I'm very excited. I've listened to quite a few of the episodes. Just very eager to have this conversation. So thanks for having me on.
Awesome. Well, great. Not only have you as a guest, but we have you as a fan. That's that's a good thing. Well, cool. Well, tell us a little bit. Tell us, I guess, how you got started in the martial arts, when, and with who.
Yeah. So my first foray into martial arts was very young. I think I was 5 or 6, and the martial art was the American martial art of wrestling. My father was a wrestler, 6th in state in Ohio. If you aren't from Ohio and you don't know, Ohio is a very serious wrestling state. Like Ohio, Iowa, and Pennsylvania, those are the big 3 wrestling states. My dad was 6th in state. My brother wrestled. So I started wrestling when I was younger. Didn't really have a passion for it. Was watching Ninja Turtles, Power Rangers, and I wanted to do martial arts. So I started in Taekwondo when I was very young. Worked up through that. Then kind of hopped around. I did karate. Karate, I know where the school was and everything, but I don't remember the actual style of karate. I was that young when I did it. Wow. And, did some Kung Fu, and then I ended up doing JKD, Kali, in the Asano lineage at the Reed Academy in Cincinnati, Ohio. And then I joined the Marine Corps, and I made my way to Hawaii through hard work and choosing Hawaii as my duty station. And I met up with Burton
awful, right?
Yeah, tough. It's a tough assignment. Yeah, and I met up with Burton Richardson there, and I trained at headquarters for some time, and I'm now an instructor under Burton Richardson, JKD Unlimited.
Wow. Okay, that's really a pretty amazing story, and the military thing's kind of interesting. The guy I started karate with. So as a junior high school friend, he was also a Marine Corps after high school. And he joined because he said, I would like to try to get stationed in Okinawa and study with the master of the system that we were studying at the time. And I thought, well, that's a hell of a gamble. I mean, Marines only have 3 major bases, basically: North Carolina, Okinawa, and then here in San Diego, right?
Correct. Yeah. I mean, those are the big ones. Those are the big ones, but there's quite a few others.
Right. And so I kept thinking, well, you could get thrown on any Navy base and all this. I'm like, it's a hell of a gamble, buddy. But it worked out. He ended up there, which was pretty cool. And then my cousin, same thing, went to college, decided, okay, I'm going to go in the Marines afterwards, went into like air traffic control. And then he gets stationed in Okinawa, but he's like almost complaining about it to like the family, because I think he was more of a homebody. He's like, "Oh my god, I'm in stationed." I was like, that's like the Hawaii of Japan. So I'm not really feeling sorry for you, dude.
I will say, as a Marine myself, and I was in Okinawa twice. So I spent 14 months in Okinawa overall, also on a boat. I did some boat tours there. I will say Okinawa for a Marine is much different than Okinawa than for a regular
Right.
civilian visiting, because there's so many restrictions because of, unfortunately, US military personnel go there and they don't exactly behave the way you would want a military personnel to behave abroad,
Yeah.
especially with an allied nation. And so, like, we had Cinderella curfew at 12, and like you could only go into certain areas. So it was very restrictive. There was while I was there were protests outside the gate of specific aircraft that we were using in Okinawa. So I understand why he complained. I do, having
Yeah.
been to Okinawa twice. And
Yeah.
also, it's worth mentioning, I went to Okinawa, did not do karate while I was there at all. No Okinawa Te, nothing. I did none of that. I did do some judo with some Marine friends of mine. Um, and then some Brazilian Jiu Jitsu as well. And some
Interesting.
MMA the first time. I did a little bit of MMA with an MMA fighter who was in my detachment. But yeah.
Interesting. So what years were you there?
I was in Okinawa for the first time was in 2010. It was the fall. It was a fall float, so I was attached to the 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit, which is a boat. So I was on the USS Essex at the time, and then the second time was 2012, and same Marine Expeditionary Unit, which we call a MEU, by the way, a MEU, same MEU, but on the Bonhomme Richard, which is named for Benjamin Franklin's pen name.
Gotcha. Well, it's interesting because I think with the three people, if include you, my cousin, and then my friend, you were all there in almost 10-year different increments
Wow.
in a way. Yeah, like my buddy Teddy was there late 1980s through probably into the 1990s. And then my cousin was there in, I want to say, 2000, around there,
Oh wow.
2002, 2003, in there somewhere. And then you were there 2010, what you're
Yeah,
saying. That's pretty interesting
exactly.
because I know like Ted, I think was a lot more free to go around because he he had this very interesting experience there where he did mix with the locals a lot and started picking up language that he thought was Japanese. And he got
Mm-hmm.
quite fluent in it because he said, I remember the words we were using in karate class. And I'm like, well, that's kind of cool. And so he gets very fluent in this language. And then they send him off to Japan to do some maneuvers with the military there. And they told him, well, go and tell this Japanese detachment what their role is in this exercise. And so he went over there and talked to them, but they looked at him like he was some kind of crazy idiot. And he came
Mm-hmm.
back and said, I don't think they understood me. He's like, oh, well, you speak Japanese, right? He said, yeah, I think so. Well, it turns out, no, he spoke the Okinawan language, not Japanese. And so they didn't understand. But then the Marines thought he was pretty adept to learning languages. So they sent him to school and he ended up getting a degree in Japanese. And then he had a Filipino uh, wife and daughter. So he learned Tagalog. So, like this, all of a sudden, this high school buddy of mine, we never realized he was kind of a genius with languages. And suddenly he was.
Oh, that's very cool. You
Yeah.
know, that's still a thing. I didn't learn the Okinawan like core language of the Ryukyu Island chain. I didn't learn that, but when I was there, I learned quite a bit of Japanese, which I've since, most of the Japanese that I know now are just very basic and judo moves. Like that's what I remember right now. But um, I remember learning Japanese in Okinawa just by talking to people and like reading a book and just asking, like trying to talk to them, and then they would repeat how I should be pronouncing it. And then we went to a base that was just outside of Tokyo on our float, and we were there for like I think 3 days or something like that. And I tried to talk to people. I was trying to speak Japanese to people, and again, they looked at me like they didn't know what I was saying because I was speaking with an accent.
Right.
And I was speaking with an American accent with an Okinawan accent
Right.
to people in mainland
Well,
Japan, and it was like for some reason, it was just unrecognizable to them what I was
Yeah.
trying to say. Also, like I wasn't that good at it. So
Right.
there's a lot of that part
Well,
too.
it's almost like you can imagine, and I'll maybe use a reference to something close to you that you would understand the accent, but almost like somebody from India coming over, learning English with a Kentucky accent, and then trying to
Right.
speak to you, and you'd be like, and it might take you a few seconds to figure out what it is they're trying to say.
Right. Yes. I've actually seen that exact thing. A person from Germany who lived in England. And so they learn to speak with an English accent, but it's a German English
Right.
accent. And then speaking them, it's like, wow, they say things very differently than I would say them. you know,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
very interesting.
It does. It makes it kind of fun. I think it makes it, if you're patient, it makes the game of communication quite a fun game, I guess.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, I've always enjoyed that with travels anyway. But well, shoot. So you studied at, sorry to sidetrack you a little bit, but it's
No problem.
interesting to kind of learn a bit about people. So you studied at probably one of the most infamous, I would say, if you kind of know Midwestern martial arts and you're old enough, you
Mhm.
know of schools through reputation and stuff. So the Reed Academy, that's a pretty infamous, historic place.
Yeah, yeah. It was around for a very long time. I still have a relationship with the instructors there, Sean and John Meyer and Shane Kremelmeyer. They teach in the same school that I teach in. Like we're all a team that we run our classes together in the same facility, Cincinnati MMA Academy. So still have a relationship with those people, and yeah,
That's cool.
formative place.
That's great. Yeah, I was kind of looking at your website and I was actually pleased to see that. I'm like, oh, well, it's hard to not have a relationship with those guys. They're so, I don't know, affable and friendly. It's hard not to be
Mhm.
friendly with them. Well, that's pretty cool. So, they were your introduction to JKD. So,
Correct.
what drew you to that type of thing after having the more traditional taekwondo karate? Was there something that you said, okay, that is what I'm looking for, or was it just more of a happy accident?
So for me, like when I went into Taekwondo, that wasn't a choice. I just said, I want to be a Ninja Turtle, and I didn't know,
Right.
I didn't know anything
Well, and
about
that's
martial
that's
arts.
the that's sort of available in the Midwest. It's
Exactly. It was right down the street. I mean, it was literally a street over from my house was this Taekwondo school, and it happened to be a guy who trained the 1992 Olympic team, like
okay.
which was on the coaching staff, if I recall correctly. Um, and yeah, so I went into that. It's a very sporting atmosphere, and there's a lot of like very heavy on kicking, and that I don't even know why that went away. I always say I remember like for one of my tests, and I got pretty high up, but one of my tests I had to do a jumping spin kick, and I
Mm.
just as a child, and I'm talking like 7 years old is when I started, so I had to be like 9 maybe when this is happening. I just did not want to do this jumping spin kick or didn't have confidence in myself, so I just like stopped going, and eventually went to a karate class, and karate has a lot more punching, and I realized like, oh, there's this whole other factor that I don't have. And then I did kung fu later because I was like, I don't know how to fight with a sword or a weapon or anything. And the kung fu class had a bunch of weapons.
Mm.
And that class actually had a sparring day. So they would spar and they would do like kickboxing sort of thing. But the whole time, I really liked Bruce Lee it's weird because Burton tells a very similar story. He watched it while it was happening, but I watched it in syndication. Um, I really like. I'm a huge Batman fan, like a
Oh
huge
yeah.
Batman fan. Yeah, like I mean, I'm a huge Batman fan, and I used to watch all of Batman stuff. And I remember a crossover episode where Green Hornet and Kato are on the thing, and Bruce Lee's there as Kato. I don't know who that is, right? And I was
Right.
like, oh, this guy's awesome. So I ended up watching Green Hornet, and my grandpa got me the whole radio series of Green Hornet because I really liked
Wow.
Kato.
Yeah.
And so I listened to all of that. And then my mom got me all of Bruce Lee's movies. And so I learned about Jeet Kune Do. I got the Tao of Jeet Kune Do. I still have that. It's like right there on my bookshelf. I have the Tao of Jeet Kune Do right there from when I was a kid. And my friend Greg, who's now an instructor at my school, he got the Tao of Jeet Kune Do. We read through it. We're like, oh man, I think I really understand this. And we didn't, but we thought we did. And yeah, I just always wanted to do JKD and just never thought to look for a JKD school. Then, I at the time it was like Ask Jeeves or Yahoo was the search
Yeah.
engine that was pervasive at the time. I typed in JKD, Jeet Kune Do in Cincinnati, and found the Reed Academy, and I went in there. And so that's kind of what brought me there. Long story, but yeah.
No, perfect. I like it because it gave me a great appreciation. So you're a little bit younger than I am, but I think it's amazing that you got a radio show and listened to it. I mean, that's even like
Yeah.
even pre me. So my grade school, junior high, and high school were all the 1980s, and there
Mm-hmm.
were a few of us because our parents are all like boomer generation, and then
Mm-hmm.
grandparents are World War II generation. So there was an affinity for radio programs in the generation before us. So it was something that we were exposed to. Some kids liked it, most did not. And I was in the few that did. So I think it's kind of cool that you grabbed onto an old radio program and listened to, like, sat and listened to all of it. Because I don't think a lot of
Yeah.
people understood that Green Hornet was a radio show before.
Yeah, no, I don't think people know that. But I've listened to, as a kid, I listened to that one. I listened to, this isn't really related to martial arts, but I listened to Superman and The
I,
Shadow as
the
well.
Shadow,
I was,
yeah.
yeah, The Shadow, love The Shadow. So cool. Yeah, but I was very lucky that my grandmother is a librarian, and my
Oh,
grandfather was into superheroes from the way back because he was born in 1936, and like the main superheroes that you think of were invented like literally as he was a kid. They were
right.
That's when they were created. So he had a love for them just like I do now. And, he would ask my grandmother to go, hey, can you order this radio series from a neighboring library? And they'd ship it in. I'd listen to it on my radio.
Wow. And then so that was your grandfather that was born in
My
36.
grandfather. Yeah,
So
36.
he's the same age as Guru Dan.
Exactly the same age. Yep. And my
Yeah.
other grandfather was also born in 1936, the same age.
Wow. And that's
Yeah.
pretty. So to do, like, when you hear Guru Dan stories, do you think of, like, do they sound similar to the things that, like, your grandfather would say?
He has very similar energy to my grandfather. I think that's why the first time I went to a seminar with Guru Dan, I was just so floored by him. Like, and everybody is, right? I mean,
Right.
this is the same story you hear from everybody that meets him. But he also reminded me of my grandfather in a huge way, and that's even more impactful now. As my grandfather's passed away. But yeah, like, yeah, same sort of timeline stories of like the ages are the same and stuff. Of course, my grandfather wasn't training with Bruce Lee in
Right.
California. It's a little different life, but yeah.
Yeah. I mean, those stories are unique, but it's always fun to listen to him. And the same with like my grandparents and everybody too, is when they discuss those changes, like in technology and everything over time. When I think one of the funny Guru Dan stories, he was talking about a kid that he went to school with, who the dad had worked for Jet Propulsion Labs or some crazy place, like that, where the technology was cutting edge. And they would sit there and the kid would say, pretty soon there's not going to be a radio. There's going to be like a radio, but it'll have pictures, talking about a TV. And they're just like, you're stupid. What are you talking about?
Right.
Pretty soon airplanes will go faster than the speed of sound. They're like, you dummy, you can't ever go faster than the speed of sound.
Yeah. Yeah, technology is incredible. That's actually my other job. I'm a technology professional at GE Aerospace.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
yeah, so yeah, I have two jobs. I run my school and then also do that. So yeah, technology, it moves very fast,
Well,
especially now.
geez, I'm glad that you could map out a couple of hours for me at this point. It sounds like you don't have enough things to do.
Yeah. Yeah, I keep busy. I do.
That's very cool. So tell me, Batman. So your
Oh
first
yeah.
Batman, was it the Adam West show?
My first, no, it had to be Michael Keaton, 1989.
Got it.
Yeah, 1989. That was the first, and then I got the comic books after that. So I was very young when that happened. I was 3 or 4 when that came out. So that movie, and then I got the comic books and the movies, the animated series and stuff like that. But yeah,
Wow. Yeah, it's cool.
I go pretty hard. Like I have above my head here. right there. You see all those on
Oh,
those are like long form graphic novels of Batman.
oh, nice, nice,
Yeah. Yeah.
nice.
Big fan.
Yeah. So obviously you probably got the Miller Dark Knight thing. That's like one of the
My
just
favorite.
yeah, by
Yeah.
far amazing.
Yeah.
Piece. No, it's funny because my first exposure to it was like late night TV was pretty prolific when I was a kid. So there's a lot of stuff that would get shown, after the kids go to bed, quote unquote, as far as
Mm-hmm.
sort of thing. So I remember seeing the what was the Batman movie made from the TV series characters, and I always thought
Yes.
it was crazy because like there was at the Joker and all the bad guys would go around and dehydrate people into piles of dust.
Yes, I remember. Yeah, I have
Yeah,
it. I have it on DVD. I love
yeah,
that.
that was my sort of first exposure to it, and then starting to collect comic books as a kid, and so that Dark Knight graphic novel came out as I was in, I want to say maybe junior high or high school. So I remember getting it. I remember buying it out and going, "Wow, this is." I mean, I found the comic pretty dark at times, but like that was even darker and pretty cool.
Yeah,
So
that was like a revolution in comics at the time, was to go real dark, right?
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
but it did like create that Tim Burton Batman, that
yeah.
whole vibe of it, which is the one I grew up with. So
Right. Well, and the fun thing about that when it was first coming out, right? So you had the darker comics, and then the flip side was the Adam West Batman, which was more silly. And
mm-hmm.
so Michael Keaton, to that point, was known as a comedic actor, and we're like, what are they going to do with this? Is this going to be silly? Is this going to be Beetlejuice, or is this going to be? We don't know, and that's why I thought it was almost brilliant to put him in there just for that reason, because you didn't know what you were going to see, at that time. We didn't know what we were going to see when we went in.
Yeah, it's like the superhero version of Die Hard, because Bruce Willis at the time was a comedian, and
Right.
everybody thought of it to the point where I wasn't, obviously I'm speaking historically, like from historical knowledge, not firsthand, but in the original trailers, they didn't even show Bruce Willis because they didn't want people to think this is.
And this concludes the abbreviated version of the podcast. Please consider supporting the program by going to www.patreon.com/MALMAG and subscribing to the show. You can also purchase this individual episode or any individual episode at our Gumroad page. That's malmag.gumroad.com. Thank you for listening to this episode with Sean Sutton. Coming up next week, I sit down at the MMA Academy and I talk with Professor Nick Sanyak. Our Malmag online store at martialartslifestylemagazine.com has a full selection of Timmy B's brand sticks for FMA and Krabiker Bong. Timmy B's brand now selling in Japan as well. Beautiful Timmy B's brand shirts and Dos Manos shirts are available with new t-shirt designs and more products coming soon. An online course in the Dos Manos method for FMA is available under the Courses tab. More courses coming soon. Check out the Places to Train tab to find schools near you, and click on the Events Calendar page to see what seminars and events are happening all around the world. And of course, visit our main page for articles on the martial arts. Music by Jack Al Relic. Martial Arts Lifestyle Magazine and the Martial Arts Lifestyle Podcast are trademarked and copyrighted by TNT LLC.